My name is Ariana. I've been married to Hudson for over 17 years, and we've shared a cozy apartment courtesy of the real estate firm where I work as an appraiser. Our son, Waylon, has already graduated from college and moved out, which made Hudson and I empty nesters. Hudson maintained a regular office job, and for many years, our relationship had been quite stable. However, recently, Hudson's constant critiques of my actions became more frequent and harder to endure. Nonetheless, I remained hopeful that this was a temporary phase. As my 52nd birthday neared, we planned a celebration with our friends and family, hoping it might rekindle our connection. We reserved a lovely restaurant and sent out invitations, setting the stage for a perfect evening. On the event day, our guests began to arrive, and I greeted them cheerfully. However, I felt a nagging sense that something was amiss, especially since my parents were uncharacteristically late. Amidst the festivities, I stepped away to call my mother. "Where are you guys?" The party started. I tried to sound calm, but concern tinged my voice. After a pause, my mother chilled me. "Ariana, darling, I'm so sorry. Your father passed away this morning." I was struck dumb with shock and disbelief. "No, that can't be true," I managed, but my mother's sorrow confirmed the grim reality. She had intended to tell me the next day, to not ruin my celebration. Returning to the party in a daze, Hudson noticed my distress and immediately asked what was wrong. I told him through tears about my father. His response was startling. "That's terrible, Ariana, but we can't cancel the party now. Everything's been paid for, and it wouldn't be fair to our guests." I was stunned by his insensitivity. Unable to comprehend his lack of empathy, I announced to everyone that I had to leave to be with my mother and encouraged them to stay and enjoy the celebration. As I headed for the door, Hudson called after me, suggesting I was being dramatic and could visit my mother the next day. Angered and heartbroken by his reaction, I left him there, speechless, as I rushed out into the cool night air. When I arrived at my childhood home, I found my mother in the dark, clutching one of my father's sweaters. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, met mine. As we embraced, the grief we shared was palpable. Sitting with her in the silent, dimly lit room, I realized my life had irrevocably changed, not just because of my father's death, but because I had seen the true nature of my husband on a day that should have brought us closer. On the day of the funeral, I stood beside my mother, accepting condolences with Waylon by my side, offering his quiet strength. As we faced this profound loss together, I understood the depth of the bonds that truly mattered. As I looked around at the gathering after the funeral service, I noticed the glaring absence of Hudson and his family. Their absence felt like a stark betrayal. Later, as we regrouped at my mother's home, Waylon confronted me, puzzled and upset. "Mom, where's Dad and Grandma and Grandpa?" I could only shake my head, a mix of anger and disappointment bubbling up as I replied, "I don't know. Honey, they didn't come." Waylon was visibly frustrated, and I could hardly blame him. That evening, after the guests had left and my mother drifted into a weary sleep, I called Hudson, unable to mask my frustration. "Where were you today?" I demanded. His excuse was that he and his parents had gotten sick, supposedly from something they ate at the birthday dinner. The timing was too convenient, and I couldn't hide my skepticism. "All three of you? You couldn't make it to my father's funeral? Do you realize how that looks, how that feels?" His apology felt hollow, and I hung up, too angry to continue the conversation. In the weeks that followed, my mother's health deteriorated, and she sank into a deep depression. I juggled work and her care, while Hudson grew increasingly distant and irritable about the situation. One evening, he suggested, rather coldly, that we consider placing her in a nursing home. I was appalled. "No, she doesn't have much time left, and I want to be with her," I insisted. We debated heatedly until I proposed a solution that would alter our lives, moving into her larger, more accommodating house to care for her. Hudson, disgusted, balked at the idea. "I'm not obligated to take care of a sick stranger," he said, refusing to see her as anything but an inconvenience. The argument stretched over days, with Hudson unmoved by my pleas. It wasn't until I pointed out the financial benefits of moving, no housing or grocery expenses, that he reluctantly agreed. Moving day was a mix of emotions. My mother's house was spacious and beautifully renovated, a sharp contrast to our previous apartment. Hudson seemed impressed by the property, commenting on its beauty and the hard work my father had put into it, though I held back my sharper thoughts. Initially, Hudson boasted about our new living arrangement to his colleagues, omitting the real reason for our move. However, as time passed, his dissatisfaction became evident. One evening, as I was cooking, he burst into the kitchen, complaining about the pervasive smell of illness. His harsh words were the last straw for me. I slammed down the knife I was holding, my patience finally worn thin. As I was preparing dinner and chopping vegetables, the smell of illness filled the room, a constant reminder of my mother's condition. Hudson's indifference grew each day. He avoided her room and complained whenever he passed her door. It was heartbreaking to watch my mother suffer not just from her illness, but also from Hudson's blatant contempt. One quiet evening, as Hudson and I sat in a strained silence at the dinner table, my mother gathered her strength to speak. "Ariana, Hudson," she began, her voice frail yet firm, "I want to thank you both for taking care of me. I know it hasn't been easy." Hudson barely acknowledged her, his eyes fixed on his plate. "I want to show my appreciation," Mom continued, causing Hudson to finally look up with a hint of interest. "Hudson, I'd like to give you the land this house is built on, and Ariana, the house itself will be yours." I was stunned. "Mom, no, you don't have to do this," I protested, but Hudson's interest was visibly piqued. My mother insisted on proceeding with her plans, adding that any remaining money would go to Waylon. Hudson, unable to hide his excitement, leaped up and fetched a bottle of wine. "Let's celebrate," he exclaimed, pouring himself a glass. Under his breath, he muttered, "Maybe the old gal will kick it sooner rather than later." I was horrified by his cruel words. "How dare you?" I hissed, rising so quickly that my chair crashed behind me. "You heartless monsters." Hudson scoffed and retorted dismissively, implying that my mother was already as good as gone, and that at least we would benefit from it. The ensuing argument was ferocious. Hudson insulted me ruthlessly, and I responded with equal fervor, releasing years of repressed frustration and disappointment. He stormed out, declaring he would stay with his parents. As days turned into weeks, Hudson stayed away, and an urgent work trip came up, a trip I couldn't refuse as it was crucial for my job, now more than ever since I was the sole caregiver for my mother. The idea of leaving her alone was daunting. I discussed my dilemma with her, and with typical selflessness, she suggested a temporary stay in hospice care. "It's just while you're away," she reassured me. "Those places are comfortable, and I'll be well taken care of." Tears filled my eyes as I agreed, heartbroken yet knowing it was the best option. We arranged her hospice care, and I prepared for my trip, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. I didn't inform Hudson about the hospice or my travel plans. He was still with his parents, purportedly to teach me a lesson. The irony of his absence during this time of genuine need was not lost on me. The night before I left, I sent Hudson a terse text, "Going on a business trip. Please look after the house." I hoped he might reflect on his actions, but more than anything, I needed him to at least maintain the practical aspects of our shared life in my absence. I didn't expect a response from Hudson, and none came. 5 days into my business trip, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Hudson. His tone dripped with a twisted delight as he greeted me. "Hello, Ariana. Guess what I've done? I've demolished your precious house." Watching the walls fall and the roof collapse was spectacular. I felt a chill run through me. "You did what? Why would you do something like that?" I managed to say. He replied with disturbing glee, "Because now you'll have to rely on me to build a new one on my land." "That's right, my land. Your mother gave it to me, remember? You'll be dependent on me, Ariana. Just like a good wife should be." As the gravity of his actions sank in, a hysterical laugh burst from me, echoing through the empty hotel room. Hudson seemed unsettled by my reaction. "Why are you laughing? This isn't funny, Ariana." Once I regained my composure, my voice was calm but icy. Oh, Hudson, you fool. Mom changed her mind at the last minute. She didn't trust you, especially after seeing how you treated her. So she switched it. The house is yours, or rather was yours. But the land? That's mine. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line before Hudson's small, disbelieving voice came through. You're lying. I'm not, I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. And Hudson, I want a divorce. I hung up, my hands trembling as the reality of his betrayal and the need for a divorce settled in. It struck me then with horrifying clarity. Hudson didn't know about Mom's move to hospice. He had been willing to demolish the house with her potentially inside. Upon returning, I immediately filed for divorce. Hudson fought bitterly, claiming the land based on my mother's initial verbal agreement, but I was prepared. I had the updated paperwork showing the last-minute changes she made. The legal battle was fierce, but justice prevailed, and I retained the land, leaving Hudson with nothing but the remains of his destructiveness. Throughout this ordeal, Waylon was my steadfast supporter. When he learned of his father's actions, his reaction was one of shock and revulsion. He did what? I can't believe it. I'm done with him, Waylon declared, severing ties with his father. After finalizing the divorce and gaining full ownership of the land, I chose to sell it. The proceeds allowed me to purchase a modest apartment. Meanwhile, my mother's health continued to decline. I visited her daily at the hospice, savoring every moment. She passed away peacefully, with me by her side, a few months later. Her funeral was small and private, and again Hudson and his family were absent, which this time felt like a relief. In the weeks following her passing, as I sorted through her belongings, I sensed something amiss. It wasn't until one evening, while browsing eBay, that I discovered listings for familiar items. Mom's antique vase, her cherished armchair, even the pearls Dad had given her on their 27th anniversary. Anger coursed through me as I realized Hudson was behind this. The next morning, fueled by a mix of fury and resolve, I drove to Hudson's parents' house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, ready to confront him and reclaim what was rightfully part of my heritage. When I arrived at Hudson's parents' house and knocked, it was my former father-in-law who answered the door. He appeared surprisingly frail and pale, which caught me off guard. Are you okay? I asked impulsively, concerned by his gaunt appearance. He twisted his face in anger and snapped back, I'm perfectly healthy, unlike your parents. His harsh words stung, and I responded more out of reflex than a genuine apology. I'm sorry. My real purpose came forth as I continued. I've seen my mother's items for sale online. I want them back. Hudson's mother joined us at the door, her expression one of feigned concern. Oh, Ariana dear, those things belong to us now. After all, the house was Hudson's when your mother passed. My frustration mounted. That's not how it works, and you know it. Those are my family's heirlooms, and I want them back now. They refused, and the ensuing argument turned bitter and loud. Eventually, they shut the door in my face, but I was far from defeated. Determined, I headed straight to the police station and filed a report. Faced with potential legal action, Hudson's parents reluctantly returned my mother's belongings. The jewelry, the furniture, everything. 7 months had passed since the dust settled on my divorce and the ordeal with Hudson's family. Life had slowly started to find a new rhythm, and I was beginning to heal from the wounds of betrayal. Then, unexpectedly, I received news that shattered our fragile peace. My former father-in-law had passed away from cancer, which had been in its advanced, untreatable stages by the time it was diagnosed. Despite our strained relations, I felt a pang of sympathy. No one deserved to suffer that way. My empathy, however, was soon tested when I received a summons to the notary's office for the reading of his will. Hudson, his mother, Waylon, and I were all called to attend. The atmosphere was tense. Hudson avoided looking at me, treating me as if I were a stranger, while his mother couldn't hide her disdain. How dare you show your face here, you ungrateful gold digger, she hissed as I took my seat. I kept my composure, and Waylon offered his hand in silent support. The notary began to read the will, and the contents took everyone by surprise. My former father-in-law had left his house to Waylon, while the land and money were bequeathed to Hudson and his mother. Hudson and his mother erupted in anger. "This is outrageous," Hudson yelled. "Everything should have come to us. We're his real family." The notary adjusted his glasses and calmly stated, "The will is legally binding. Mr. Matthew was of sound mind when he made these decisions. You won't be able to contest this in court." As we left the office, I noticed Waylon was deep in thought and unusually quiet. I gave him space, knowing he would talk when he was ready. 3 weeks later, I was enjoying a moment of peace in my apartment when my phone rang. It was my former mother-in-law. Her voice panicked. "Ariana, you have to come quickly. Your son, he's gone mad. He's hired construction equipment to tear down the house." Rushing to the scene, I found chaos. Heavy machinery loomed over the house, and Waylon stood resolute. Hudson and his mother were frantic, pleading with the construction workers to stop. Waylon approached me, his expression determined yet calm. "Mom, I know this might seem extreme," he began, preparing to explain his drastic decision. Waylon looked at me with a resolve that was hard and sharp. "It's retribution for what they did. To Grandma's house. To you. To us," he explained. I nodded, understanding the swirl of pain and anger that fueled his decision. "I know, sweetie. I'm not here to stop you." He gave a nod to the foreman, and the noise of the destruction filled the air. Hudson and his mother's cries were lost amidst the sounds of crashing walls and breaking glass. As the house fell, my emotions were a storm. Part of me mourned the loss of what once was, memories of laughter and love that the house once held. But another part of me felt a cathartic release, a sense of justice being served. Weeks later, as I was settling into a peaceful evening, a knock interrupted my solitude. Opening the door, I found Hudson and his mother, their appearance ragged and worn. "Ariana," Hudson began, his voice a blend of desperation and veiled bitterness, "we need to talk. We have nowhere to go. We were hoping we could stay with you for a while." I was speechless. "Stay with me? After everything? You've always been so kind and responsible," his mother chimed in, her eyes pleading. The audacity of their request left me reeling. These were the people who had inflicted so much pain, who had disrespected my mother in her final days, now seeking my charity. "No," I replied with finality, "absolutely not." Their faces fell, but I continued, my voice firm as years of suppressed frustration and hurt surged. "Have you forgotten how you treated my mother? How you labeled her a burden? How you were ready to destroy her house while she might have been inside, just to spite me?" They seemed ashamed, but beneath that, I sensed their simmering anger. "We've made mistakes," Hudson admitted reluctantly. "Where are we supposed to go?" he added. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. "That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences, just like I had to." They left, muttering under their breath. After they were gone, I immediately blocked their numbers. I wanted no further disturbances from them. Through mutual friends, I later learned that Hudson had sold the land where the demolished house once stood. With the money, he purchased a small apartment in a rundown part of the city. Mentioning this to Waylon during one of our dinners, he snorted, "That's where they belong," his tone bitter. "In a crumbling apartment, surrounded by decay. It's fitting, isn't it?" I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was a twinge of pity for Hudson and his mother, now reduced to such a state. But the larger part of me remembered all the harm they had caused, the harsh words and cruel actions. The past months have been transformative for me. My career at the real estate company was thriving, and I had recently received a generous quarterly bonus. Being recognized for my hard work was gratifying, especially after such a tumultuous period. Running my hand over the smooth surface of my mother's restored old writing desk, I felt a connection to her. The familiar grain of the wood evoked memories of her sitting there, writing letters, and managing her finances. It felt as if a part of her was still with me, guiding me as I rebuilt my life. The ringing of my phone interrupted my reflections. It was Waylon, his voice buzzing with excitement. As I answered the phone, Waylon's voice brimmed with excitement. "Mom, I've got news," he announced eagerly. "What is it, honey?" I asked, though I had a hunch about what he might say. "I proposed to Melody, and she said yes." My heart overflowed with joy. Melody was a wonderful young woman, kind and intelligent, and she truly brought out the best in Waylon. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you both." We talked for a while about their plans for the future, and then Waylon's tone shifted to something more serious. "Mom, there's something else I want to talk to you about, the wedding. I've decided I don't want to invite Dad or Grandma. After everything they've done, I don't want them there on the happiest day of my life." I took a deep breath, understanding his decision. "Waylon, it's entirely your decision. Your wedding day should be a celebration of love and joy, surrounded by people who truly care about you and Melody. If that's what feels right for you, then I support you completely." After we hung up, my mind lingered on Hudson and his mother. I didn't actively seek information about them, but snippets of their lives reached me occasionally. The last update was that Hudson was working 2 jobs to make ends meet, still living in that rundown apartment with his mother. They had tried to control and break me, but instead, they found themselves struggling in the mess they'd made, while I had emerged from the ordeal stronger and more resilient. I picked up a framed photo of my parents from the newly restored side table. Gazing at it, I whispered, "I wish you could see this, Mom and Dad. I think you'd be proud." Their memories and the values they instilled in me continued to guide me, reinforcing my resolve to live a life filled with integrity and love, a stark contrast to the bitterness and regret that seemed to fill Hudson and his mother's days. My parents' legacy was a beacon in my journey, and I felt their quiet approval in my heart as I navigated this new chapter of my life.